After living in another country for 8 years, I returned home to surprise my daughter. But instead of hugs, I saw my daughter on her knees washing the floor in torn clothes, while my son-in-law and his friends laughed. "This is my cheap servant." Then I decided to give them another surprise, one that would change their lives forever. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The streets of Lakewood looked smaller than I remembered. 8 years had passed since I'd driven through this neighborhood, back when the trees were younger and the house at the end of Maple Drive still belonged only to my daughter. I'd sold 3 auto repair shops in Calgary to buy her that place. Every dollar I'd saved over 30 years, handed over with pride. She'd cried when I gave her the keys. 24 years old then, fresh out of college, talking about the garden she'd plant and the porch she'd refinish. The rental car smelled like artificial pine. I'd landed at Denver that morning, picked up the sedan, and spent 45 minutes rehearsing what I'd say when I surprised her. "Happy birthday, baby girl. Thought I'd see you in person this year. Maybe we could talk about why you look so tired on our last video call." I turned onto Maple Drive. The house sat 3 lots down, a modest 2-story with blue shutters I'd helped her paint one summer. Except the shutters weren't blue anymore, or maybe they were, under the dirt and peeling chips. I slowed the car. The lawn had gone wild, brown patches spreading like disease. A crack split the front window. The rose bushes Celeste had loved lay tangled and dying against the foundation. Something cold settled in my chest. I parked at the curb and sat there, hands on the wheel. This wasn't the house I remembered. This wasn't the life she'd described in our monthly calls. "Everything's great, Dad. Just busy with work. Leo's wonderful. We're thinking about renovating the kitchen." The front door stood slightly ajar. I grabbed my suitcase from the trunk and walked up the path, stepping over newspapers yellowed by weather. The porch boards sagged under my weight. Through the gap in the door, I heard voices. Male, laughing about something on television. Football commentary mixed with the clink of bottles. I pushed the door open slowly. It didn't creak. The hinges were well oiled, like someone came and went often, casually, without announcing themselves. The entryway opened into a hallway. Family photos on the wall, except they were crooked, one frame cracked. The air smelled stale, like windows hadn't been opened in weeks. I set my suitcase down carefully and listened. The voices came from the living room to my left, but something else caught my attention. A rhythmic scrubbing sound from deeper in the hall. I moved forward. My shoes were quiet on the hardwood. Then I saw her. Celeste was on her knees in the middle of the hallway, bent over a bucket of soapy water, scrubbing at the floor with both hands. Her hair hung loose, unwashed, hiding her face. She wore sweatpants and an old t-shirt torn at the shoulder, exposing pale skin mottled with bruises, purple and yellow, fresh enough to still hurt. Her arms were thin, thinner than I'd ever seen them, and more bruises marked her elbows and wrists in fingerprint patterns. My hand found the doorframe, the suitcase handle cut into my palm. She didn't know I was there. She just kept scrubbing, mechanical, like she'd been doing it for hours. Her shoulders hunched forward in a way that made her look smaller, breakable. This was my daughter. This was my baby girl, who used to climb trees and fix carburetors with me in the garage. This was the woman who'd graduated summa cum laude and talked about opening her own consulting firm. From the living room, a man's voice cut through the air, sharp and mocking. "You missed a spot near the corner, sweetheart. Do I need to come show you how to clean properly again?" Another voice joined in, younger, laughing. "Man, you've got her well trained." The first voice again, louder now, dripping with contempt. "What can I say? Some people are born to serve. Faster, my cheap help. I have guests and you haven't cleaned that stain." Celeste flinched. Her hands moved faster over the floor, the rag making wet circles on wood that already looked spotless. "I'm trying," she whispered, so quiet I barely heard it. "I'm sorry." The world narrowed to that hallway, to my daughter on her knees, to the bruises in the torn shirt, and the way she apologized to someone who spoke to her like she was nothing. I'd given her this house. I'd met Leo twice on video calls, smiled, and congratulated them when they got married. I'd sent money when she said they needed help with repairs. I'd believed her when she said everything was fine. My knuckles whitened around the suitcase handle. The rage that flooded through me was cold, surgical, nothing like the hot anger of my youth. This was the fury of a father who'd failed to protect his child. This was the realization that I'd handed her to a monster and walked away. I took one step forward. The floorboard creaked under my weight. Celeste's head snapped up. Her eyes went wide when she saw me, not with joy, not with relief, with pure terror. "Dad?" The word came out strangled. She dropped the rag, scrambled to her feet, and moved toward me with her hands up like she was trying to stop a collision. "What are you? Please, you need to go. Please." Her face, now that I could see it clearly, was worse than her arms. A bruise spread across her left cheekbone, greenish-yellow at the edges, purple-black at the center. Her lower lip was split, scabbed over. When she reached for me, her fingers trembled. "Celeste." My voice came out harder than I intended. "What is this? What's happened to you?" She shook her head frantically, glancing back toward the living room. "You can't be here. You need to leave right now. I'll call you later. I'll explain. Just please." "Who the hell are you?" I looked past my daughter. A man stood in the hallway entrance, beer bottle in one hand, the other scratching his chest through a stained white t-shirt. Tall, maybe 6'2", with a thick neck and the kind of casual arrogance that came from never being challenged. His eyes swept over me, dismissive, like I was a door-to-door salesman who'd wandered into the wrong house. "Did someone invite you into my house?" He took a step forward, setting the bottle on the hall table. Behind him, 2 other men appeared in the living room doorway, watching. I moved around Celeste, keeping my body between them. "Your house? I'm Porter Hudson, Celeste's father." Something flickered in his expression. Recognition, then calculation, then a slow, mean smile. "Oh, the famous father from Canada." He drew out the word famous like it was a joke. "Finally decided to show up? Well, old man, this is my home now. My wife, my rules." The way he said "my" turned my stomach, like she was property, like the house I'd bought with 3 decades of work had become his the moment he put a ring on her finger. "Your wife has bruises," I said, my voice low and controlled. "Want to explain that?" He laughed, actually laughed. Then his expression hardened, and he took another step toward me, close enough that I could smell the beer on his breath. "Want to explain breaking into my house? That's trespassing, old man. Henry..." He glanced back at one of his friends. "Call the cops. We got a trespasser." "Dad, please." Celeste's voice cracked. She grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the door. "Just go. It's fine. Everything's fine." I turned to her, and the desperation in her eyes hit harder than anything Leo had said. She wasn't asking me to save her. She was begging me to leave her here with him. "Fine." I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. "Look at yourself." Leo moved fast for a big man. His hand clamped around my upper arm, and he shoved me hard toward the front door. I was 64 years old, and he was in his 30s, and the force of it sent me stumbling backward. I caught myself against the doorframe. "She said leave," Leo growled, his face inches from mine now. "This is my house, old man. Papers have my name on them. If you don't want real problems, get out, now." I could have swung. Part of me wanted to. But there were 3 of them and 1 of me, and I'd been in enough fights to know when the odds were bad. More than that, I needed to understand what I was dealing with. Needed to think. I looked past Leo to Celeste. She stood in the hallway, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the floor. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "We'll see whose house this is," I said quietly. Leo shoved me through the doorway. I caught my balance on the porch, heard him slam the door behind me, heard the lock click. I stood there for a moment, my luggage still inside, my daughter trapped in there with him. Then I walked to the rental car and got in. My hands shook as I started the engine. Not from fear, from rage so pure it made my vision blur at the edges. I pulled away from the curb slowly, watching the house in the rearview mirror. Leo appeared in the front window, arms crossed, watching me leave like he'd won something. The papers have my name on them. That sentence echoed in my head as I drove to the end of the block and turned the corner. I pulled over, killed the engine, and sat there gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. I'd bought that house. Every nail, every shingle, every inch of that property came from my money, my work, my sacrifice. And somehow, in 2 years of marriage, he'd gotten his name on the deed. He'd turned my gift to my daughter into a weapon to control her. The bruises weren't accidents. The way she'd flinched when he raised his voice. The way she'd begged me to leave instead of asking me for help. This had been going on for a while, long enough that she'd stopped fighting, long enough that she believed she deserved it, or that no one could save her, or that trying to escape would only make things worse. My phone was in my pocket. I could call the police, report domestic violence. But Celeste had looked at me with those terrified eyes and told me everything was fine. She'd defend him. I knew she would. And he'd make sure I never got close to her again. I needed proof. I needed leverage. I needed to understand exactly what I was up against before I moved. I pulled away from the curb and drove. No destination in mind, just movement to keep the rage from consuming me whole. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the streets. Somewhere in that house, my daughter was probably being punished for my visit. Somewhere in there, Leo was reminding her who was in charge. I wasn't going back to Canada, not yet. Not until I'd taken back everything he'd stolen. I drove into downtown Denver as the sun dropped behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of copper and ash. The Hampton Inn sat on a busy corner, the kind of place business people stayed when traveling on a budget. I checked in, took the key card from a clerk who barely looked at me, and rode the elevator to the 4th floor. Room 412 was generic, beige walls, industrial carpet, a queen bed with a burgundy comforter that had seen 1,000 guests. I dropped my suitcase on the luggage rack and sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at the painting of abstract mountains bolted to the wall. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Dad, it's me. Don't come back. Please don't make this worse." I read it 3 times before setting the phone face down on the nightstand. She'd gotten my number from our video call history. She was reaching out to push me away. I opened my laptop instead and typed "Property Law Attorney Denver" into the search bar. The screen filled with names, firms, professional headshots of people in expensive suits promising results. I clicked through several, reading reviews, checking credentials, until I found Bernice Cole and Associates. 15 years of property litigation experience. Former prosecutor. The reviews mentioned words like relentless and thorough. I sent an email at 8:30 that night. Need urgent consultation regarding property fraud and gift deed violation. Will pay standard rates. Please respond ASAP. While I waited, I pulled out a small notebook I'd bought at a gas station on the drive over. I wrote down everything I could remember about the original transaction 10 years ago. The gift deed, the closing appointment at the title company, the clause the agent had mentioned in passing, something about residential use only, family occupancy. I searched through my email archives, typing Celeste House Deed into the search bar. 3 screens of results. I scrolled until I found it. A PDF attachment from March 2015. Subject line, "Your daughter's new home. Congratulations." I downloaded it, printed it at the hotel's business center down the hall, the machine humming and clicking in the empty room at 9 o'clock at night. When the pages slid into the tray, I read them under the fluorescent lights. There it was halfway down page 2. Property to be used solely as primary family residence. Commercial use, rental, or use as business collateral prohibited without grantor consent. I'd forgotten about that clause. The title agent had added it as protection, standard procedure for gift deeds to prevent tax complications. At the time, it had seemed like paperwork formality. Now, it was leverage. My phone chimed. An email from Bernice Cole's office. "Ms. Cole can see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Please bring all relevant documentation." The next morning, I took the elevator to the 23rd floor of a glass tower 3 blocks from my hotel. Bernice Cole's office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, leather chairs, and a mahogany desk that probably cost more than my first car. She was in her 40s, dark hair pulled back, wearing a charcoal suit that fit like it had been tailored specifically for her. "Mr. Hudson." She shook my hand with a grip that meant business. "Tell me what we're dealing with." I slid the deed across her desk. She put on reading glasses and scanned it, her expression shifting from neutral interest to something sharper. "Your son-in-law's name isn't on the original deed," she said. "He got added later, 2 years ago, after they married. Did you consent to that?" "I didn't know about it until yesterday." She set the document down and folded her hands. "Mr. Hudson, this is actually stronger than most cases I see. If your son-in-law used this house as collateral for business loans, he violated the gift deed terms. We can challenge his ownership. How long will this take? Depends on how cooperative he is. If he fights it, could be months. And my retainer is $5,000. My hourly rate is $350. I pulled out my checkbook. I'll write you a check now. How do we start? First, we need proof he's using the house commercially. Business loans, company registration, anything showing that address used for his construction company. I spent the next 2 weeks becoming invisible. I drove to the county recorder's office and requested property records for the Lakewood address. The clerk, a tired woman in her 50s, pulled up the file and let me photograph the relevant pages with my phone. I found liens, transfers, amendments, and there, dated 18 months ago, a recorded lien from Rocky Mountain Equipment Finance, $75,000. Debtor, Leo Spencer, Spencer Construction, SLC. Collateral, residential property at the Lakewood address. I photographed construction sites where trucks bearing the Spencer Construction logo sat idle in the mud. I drove past the Lakewood house at different times, never stopping, just observing. One afternoon, I saw a company truck in the driveway, and through my telephoto lens, borrowed from a pawn shop for $40, I captured business documents spread across the dashboard. The letterhead showed the Lakewood address. I called Bernice from a coffee shop in Lakewood, watching the house from 2 blocks away. I found it, I said. County records show a lien on the property, $75,000 to Rocky Mountain Equipment Finance. The loan application lists it as collateral for Spencer Construction. Her satisfaction carried through the phone. That's what we needed. I'll draft a formal demand letter. 3 days later, I sat in her office again. She slid an envelope across the polished desk. "This goes certified mail today," she said. "He'll have it by tomorrow." Then we wait. I picked it up. The weight of it felt right, substantial. The first move. Bernice called me 3 days later while I was pouring coffee in the hotel room, the morning news playing on mute in the background. "He signed for the letter yesterday afternoon," she said without preamble. "Now we're on the clock. 30 days for him to comply, or we file the motion in court." I set the coffee pot down carefully. "What are the chances he actually removes the lien?" "Low. He'd need to refinance or pay off the loan outright. Given what we found about his company's debts, neither is likely." After we hung up, I sat at the small desk and imagined Leo opening that envelope, seeing the law firm letterhead, reading the demand. I hoped it ruined his breakfast. At the Lakewood house, it did worse than that. I didn't witness this part, but I pieced it together later from what Celeste told me, from public records, from the pattern of what came next. Leo had opened the certified mail in the living room, Henry sitting on the couch beside him, both of them drinking beer, even though it was barely 10 in the morning. Leo read it once, laughed, and tossed it onto the coffee table. "Your father's pathetic," he'd said to Celeste, who was washing dishes in the kitchen. "He thinks he can threaten me? This is my house. I've put work into this place. He abandoned you for 8 years, and now he wants to play hero?" Celeste had dried her hands on a dish towel, voice quiet. "Maybe you should talk to a lawyer." "I have a lawyer." Leo had waved the letter dismissively. "This is nothing, just an old man having a tantrum." But 2 hours later, Leo sat in Tom Brewster's office, a cramped room above a sandwich shop in Aurora, nothing like Bernice's downtown tower. Tom was 50-something, with a comb-over and coffee-stained ties, the kind of attorney who handled small business contracts and traffic tickets. Tom read the letter twice, his expression souring. "Leo, this isn't nothing," he'd said. "If the original deed had conditions and you violated them, they might have a case. When did you put the house up as collateral?" 2 years ago. I needed equipment. The house is in both our names. I had every right." "Did your wife know you were using it as collateral?" Leo had gone silent. Then, "What does that matter?" Tom had leaned back in his chair, which squeaked. "It matters because it establishes intent. Look, you need to either comply with this demand or prepare for a fight, and fights are expensive." Over the next 10 days, Leo tried to comply. He walked into Mountain States Credit Union, wearing his best button-down shirt, freshly shaved, projecting the confidence of a successful contractor. He sat across from Patricia Sanchez, a loan officer with kind eyes and 15 years of experience spotting bad risks. He slid his refinance application across her desk. She reviewed it, her expression shifting from professional neutrality to something apologetic. "I'm sorry, Mr. Spencer," she said. "With your current debt load and recent missed payments, we can't approve a refinance of this size." Leo leaned forward. "But I have collateral. The house is worth $450,000. The issue isn't collateral, it's your ability to repay. Your company shows negative cash flow for the last 2 quarters. He tried 2 more banks, then a credit union, then a predatory lender who offered him 15% interest on a loan he couldn't afford even if they approved it, which they didn't. Spencer Construction was drowning in debt, $180,000 spread across equipment loans, unpaid supplier invoices, and 3 maxed-out business credit cards. Leo had been juggling payments for 6 months, robbing Peter to pay Paul, keeping the whole operation afloat through sheer stubbornness and increasingly creative accounting. The demand letter had pulled the rug out from under him. 2 weeks after receiving it, late on a Thursday night, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Dad?" Celeste's voice was barely a whisper. I heard running water in the background, a faucet turned on high. "Celeste?" I sat up in bed, heart accelerating. "Are you okay? Please." Her voice cracked. "Just stop this. He's breaking things. He's screaming. Please." "Celeste, I'm doing this for you. You can't see it now, but—" "No, you don't understand." A crash in the background. Leo's voice, muffled but angry. "Who are you talking to? I have to go." The line went dead. I called back immediately. It went straight to voicemail. I stood at the hotel window, pressing my forehead against the cold glass, watching the lights of Denver spread out below me like a circuit board. Somewhere out there, in that house I'd bought with every dollar I'd saved, my daughter was terrified. Because of me, because of what I was doing. But if I stopped now, she'd be trapped forever. I pulled up Bernice's number. It was past midnight, but I texted anyway. "We move forward. File the motion as soon as the 30 days are up. No delays." The response came within seconds. "Understood." I set the phone down on the windowsill and looked out at the city. My reflection stared back at me from the dark glass. A 64-year-old man who'd once thought buying his daughter a house would keep her safe. Across town, in that house I'd paid for with 30 years of labor, my daughter was afraid. But soon, she wouldn't have to be. Soon, Leo Spencer would learn what it meant to take something from someone who knew how to take it back. Bernice's office phone buzzed while we were reviewing the deed reversal motion. She glanced at the screen and her expression shifted. Not alarm exactly, but the tight focus of someone recognizing a problem. "What is it?" I asked. She turned the phone toward me. "Your son-in-law just filed for a restraining order." I read the notification twice. Leo Spencer versus Porter Hudson. Petition for restraining order. Allegations, harassment, threats, unwelcome intrusion into family home. "He's trying to box you out," Bernice said, setting the phone down. "Smart move, actually. If he gets this order, you can't come near the house while we're litigating the deed." "Can he win?" "Depends on what evidence he presents. Did you threaten him in any way during your confrontation?" I thought back to that moment at the door. I told him we'd see whose house it was, that's all. "That's vague enough. We'll fight it." She pulled up her calendar. "Hearing set for late April, 3 weeks. Until then, stay away from the property." I spent those 3 weeks preparing. If Leo wanted to play defense, I'd keep attacking from different angles. The Jefferson County Assessor's Office occupied a bland government building off Highway 6. I parked in the public lot and spent 2 hours at a computer terminal in the records room, scrolling through property tax databases. The information was all there for anyone willing to look. Payment history, assessment values, liens. The Lakewood house had $8,500 in delinquent property taxes, 2 years' worth. Leo hadn't paid a cent since taking ownership. I wrote an anonymous letter that evening at my hotel, simple and factual. Property at address has unpaid taxes totaling $8,500. Owner, Leo Spencer. Tax ID, number. I mailed it from a post office in Aurora the next morning. Then I turned my attention to Leo's business debts. Public records showed Spencer Construction LLC, with liens from multiple creditors. I made a list, looked up contact information, and started making calls. Jim Hendricks owned Denver Building Supply, a warehouse operation in Commerce City. He met me in his cluttered office, surrounded by catalogs and invoices stacked on metal shelving. "I understand Leo Spencer owes you $85,000, I said. Jim leaned back in his chair, which creaked. "Word travels. Yeah, he owes me. 4 months behind. I've threatened to sue, but lawyers cost money, and Spencer's probably judgment-proof anyway. I'd like to buy that debt." His eyebrows went up. "Why would you want to do that? He's not paying." "I have my reasons. I'll give you $60,000 cash, That's 70 cents on the dollar, today. Jim studied me, calculation happening behind his eyes. You know he'll probably still default. That's my problem, not yours. Do we have a deal? He thought about it for maybe 30 seconds. Then he pulled out a file. Let me get the paperwork. I made the same offer to Randy Cooper at Mountain Equipment Rentals. $55,000 in debt, I paid $35. By the end of the week, I owned $140,000 of Leo Spencer's obligations. The restraining order hearing happened on a gray Tuesday morning. The courtroom was small, just a dozen seats in the gallery. Leo sat with Tom Brewster at one table, both of them in wrinkled suits that had seen better days. Bernice and I took the other table. Judge Sarah Matthews presided, a stern woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She reviewed the petition while we waited. Mr. Brewster, she said finally, your client alleges harassment and threats. Present your evidence. Tom stood, adjusting his tie. Your Honor, Mr. Hudson appeared uninvited at my client's home, made threatening statements, and has since initiated a frivolous lawsuit designed to harass my client and his wife. The judge looked at me over her glasses. Mr. Hudson, is it true you entered their home without invitation? I stood. Yes, Your Honor, to surprise my daughter on her birthday. I found her injured and afraid. Bernice rose smoothly beside me. Your Honor, we have photographs taken that day showing significant bruising on Mrs. Spencer's face and arms. Mr. Hudson's concern was legitimate. She slid printed photos across the bench. I'd taken them on my phone that first day, barely thinking about it, just documentation of what I'd seen. Now they became evidence. Judge Matthews examined them, her expression hardening. These are concerning. Mr. Brewster, does your client have an explanation for these injuries? Tom fumbled with his papers. My client states his wife is clumsy, had a fall. I'm denying the restraining order. Judge Matthews cut him off. Insufficient evidence of harassment or threats. However, she looked at both sides. Both parties will conduct themselves through proper legal channels. No direct contact. All communication through attorneys. Understood? We both acknowledged. Leo's face had gone pale. We walked down the courthouse steps into the April sunlight. Bernice stopped at the bottom, pulling on her sunglasses. So what now? She asked. I pulled the debt assignment papers from my briefcase. Now I'm his creditor, and it's time to collect. Her smile was quick and sharp. I'll draft the demand letter. I nodded, tucking the papers away. Across town, Leo had no idea what was coming, but he would, soon enough. Bernice called me a week later, satisfaction in her voice. The debt collection letter was delivered this morning, certified mail, signed for, at his office. I was sitting at the hotel room desk, coffee going cold beside my laptop. How long before he responds? If he's smart, immediately. If he's desperate, he'll try to negotiate. Either way, we gave him 30 days. He doesn't have $140,000. I know, Bernice said. That's the point. She called again 2 days later. He reached out, wants to negotiate a payment plan. And I told him no, full payment in 30 days, or we file for involuntary bankruptcy of Spencer Construction. I heard something in the background of her call, papers shuffling, a door closing. How'd he sound? Panicked. Over the following weeks, I kept watching. Not from close range, the judge's warning had been clear, but I had other ways of gathering information, public records, business databases, and Bernice had contacts in the construction industry who heard things. Leo's business was collapsing faster than I'd anticipated. 2 major clients, Mountain View Homes and Denver West Development, had canceled their contracts. Word in the industry was that Spencer Construction had fallen behind on deadlines, quality issues on the projects, too many corners cut. When you're hemorrhaging money, you make mistakes. When you make mistakes, you lose clients. When you lose clients, the hemorrhaging gets worse. Bernice's investigator, a former paralegal named Rita, who freelanced for several law firms, gave me updates every few days. His crew quit, Rita told me over coffee at a diner near the courthouse. 3 weeks behind on payroll. The foreman walked off a job site with the whole team. When? Yesterday. Left Leo standing there with half a foundation poured and no one to finish it. I stirred my coffee, thinking. What about his equipment? He's been trying to sell it. Hit up 3 dealerships this week. Problem is, most of it's financed. He got $30,000 for what wasn't encumbered, But that's barely a dent in what he owes you. 30,000 out of 140. The mathematics were brutal and simple. Rita pulled out her phone, showed me photos she'd taken from public areas. Leo's construction office, lights off in the middle of a weekday. His truck parked at the Lakewood house at 2 in the afternoon when he should have been on a job site. He's falling apart, she said. I studied the photos. Keep watching. That evening, Bernice forwarded me an email. Leo had sent another plea for a payment plan. Bernice's response was 3 sentences. Our position remains unchanged. Full payment of $140,000 within 30 days from original demand. Failure to comply will result in bankruptcy filing. 2 weeks after the debt demand letter, Rita called with something different. Your son-in-law tried to call you, she said. Well, not you directly. He called my office asking for your contact information, wanted to speak with you personally. What did you tell him? That all communication goes through your attorney, per the judge's order. She paused. He sounded drunk, Mr. Hudson. It was 3 in the afternoon. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat at the window, looking out at Denver's skyline. Somewhere out there, Leo Spencer was unraveling, his business dying, his debts crushing him, his options narrowing to nothing. Part of me, a small part I wasn't proud of, felt satisfaction. This was what happened when you hurt someone I loved. This was the price. But another part, the part that remembered Celeste's terrified whisper on that late-night phone call, felt only urgency. I needed to break him completely before he broke her worse. Rita sent me one final piece of intelligence near the end of April. She'd been parked near the Lakewood house, at a respectful distance, nothing that violated the judge's order, and had photographed Leo and Henry leaving together around 10 p.m., both of them stumbling slightly. They'd gone to a bar 3 blocks away, some dive called the Dusty Boot. He was there until closing, Rita reported. 2 a.m. Henry drove him home. Leo could barely walk. The next morning, she went back and talked to the bartender, bought him a beer, asked casual questions. The bartender remembered them, hard not to. Leo had been loud, bitter, going on about someone destroying his business. He kept saying someone bought his debts, the bartender had told Rita. Kept talking about some old man who was taking everything from him. His friend kept telling him to calm down, but he just got louder. I read Rita's report twice. Leo understood what I was doing. He saw the pattern, the systematic dismantling. He knew I was coming for everything he had. Good. Let him see it coming. On the last day of April, exactly 30 days after the debt demand letter, Leo made one final attempt. He called Bernice's office and offered the $30,000 from his equipment sales, plus a promissory note for the remaining $110,000 payable over 5 years. Bernice didn't even consult me. Rejected, she emailed, proceeding with bankruptcy filing tomorrow. I walked to the window of my hotel room, looking toward the mountains in the distance. The peaks still held snow, white against the blue sky. Leo Spencer had 1 night left before his world finished collapsing, and somewhere in that house I'd bought for my daughter, Celeste was waiting. Waiting for this nightmare to end. Waiting to be free. One more move, and she would be. Bernice was reviewing documents when I arrived at her office on a Tuesday morning in late May. The city spread out behind her through the floor-to-ceiling windows, bright and indifferent. He defaulted, she said without looking up. The 30 days expired yesterday. No payment, no contact, nothing. I sat across from her. What's next? She slid a paper across the desk. This came through this morning. Jefferson County tax assessor placed a lien on the Lakewood property, $8,500 in unpaid property taxes. I picked up the document, scanned it. The county had moved quickly after my anonymous tip weeks ago. How long does he have? 90 days to pay or it goes to tax auction. Though with the deed dispute already in motion, this complicates things. I set the paper down, thinking. Or simplifies them. Make him an offer. I'll pay the tax debt and forgive $40,000 of what he owes me. In exchange, he vacates the house and signs a quitclaim deed. Bernice looked at me over her reading glasses. That's generous, actually, more than he deserves. It's not about generosity. It's about my daughter getting out of that house. She nodded slowly. I'll draft it today. The offer went out that afternoon. Tom Brewster called Leo within an hour of receiving it. I wasn't on the call, but Bernice told me about it later, how Leo had paced his small office, how his voice had risen steadily as Tom read the terms. What? He wants me to just leave? Sign away my rights to the house? Tom had tried to be reasonable. In exchange for paying the tax lien and forgiving $40,000 in debt. Leo, that's $60-some thousand. You should consider. It's blackmail. He's holding the house hostage. Legally, it's a settlement offer, and frankly, you don't have many options here. Leo's response had been immediate and final. Tell him no. Tell that old man I'm not going anywhere. This is my house. Bernice relayed this to me that evening. I stood at my hotel window, looking at nothing in particular. He'll lose it anyway, I said. I know, but he can't see that yet. I made another call the next day, not to Bernice this time. I contacted Denver's Building and Safety Department, spoke to someone in code enforcement, asked general questions about how to report potential violations. The clerk was helpful, professional. All reports could be made anonymously. Inspectors would investigate any credible complaint. I'd been keeping Rita's surveillance reports. She'd documented Leo's recent construction projects, rushed work, cut corners, the desperate scramble of a man trying to save a dying business. I compiled addresses, project details, and sent them to the city. 3 days later, Luis Rodriguez from Building and Safety showed up at one of Leo's job sites in Aurora. Leo was there, trying to coordinate the few workers he had left. Rodriguez wore a hard hat and carried a clipboard, his department camera hanging from a strap around his neck. "Mr. Spencer?" Rodriguez had walked the foundation, photographed the electrical panel, checked permit records on his tablet. "These footings aren't to code. Where's your inspection sign-off for the foundation pour?" Leo had scrambled for answers. The inspector signed off. I have the paperwork somewhere. I don't see any record of it. And this electrical panel, who did this work? This isn't up to code either. Look, I can fix whatever needs fixing. I'm issuing a stop work order. You'll need to hire a licensed electrician, get the footings inspected and potentially redone, and reapply for permits. There's also a $15,000 fine for unpermitted work. Rodriguez visited 2 more job sites over the next week. Each time, he found violations. Each time, he placed red stop work stickers on gates and doors. Each time, he added fines to Leo's mounting debts. Rita sent me photos. Leo sitting in his truck outside a stopped project, staring straight ahead. Leo on his phone, probably listening to angry clients. Leo retrieving a crumpled paper from a trash can, the settlement offer he'd rejected. Then Henry called me, actually called my phone, which surprised me enough that I answered. "You don't know me," he said, "but I'm Leo's friend, and I think you should stop." "Stop what?" "Whatever you're doing, he's losing it. He knows you're behind everything, the debts, the taxes, the inspections. He's talking about you constantly." "He's right," I said. "I am behind it." Henry was quiet for a moment. "Look, I don't know what happened between you two, but he hurt my daughter for 2 years. That's what happened." Another pause. "I didn't know it was that bad." "Now you do." I hung up. Bernice called that evening while I was eating takeout at my hotel room desk. "He rejected the offer," she said, "officially in writing, and he filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy this afternoon. He's trying to protect the house as his primary residence." I set down my fork, the food suddenly tasteless. "Can he?" "Not if we prove fraud and how he got on the deed. I'll need Celeste to testify." I closed my eyes. That was the piece I'd been avoiding, the one thing I couldn't orchestrate or control. Celeste would have to stand up in public, in front of Leo, and tell the truth about what he'd done. "Set it up," I said. The line was quiet for a moment. "Porter, you know what you're asking of her?" "I know." My voice came out rougher than I intended. "But it's the only way." I'd moved out of the hotel in late June, into a small 1-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill. Nothing fancy, furnished by the previous tenant, a worn couch, and a kitchen table with 3 chairs. But it had a window that let in morning light, and it cost less than the hotel. I was conserving resources now. This fight had already cost me more than money. The hearing was set for July 15th. Bernice called me 2 weeks before to tell me Celeste had agreed to testify. "How did she sound?" I asked. "Scared, but ready." Bernice paused. "Porter, if she breaks down on the stand, she won't. You can't know that. She's my daughter, I know." The morning of the hearing, I woke before dawn, made coffee I didn't drink, changed shirts twice, arrived at the courthouse 40 minutes early, and sat on a bench in the hallway, watching people pass, lawyers with briefcases, families with worried faces, a man in an orange jumpsuit shuffling between guards. Then I saw Celeste. She walked down the hallway with Bernice, wearing a simple gray dress I didn't recognize. She'd lost weight since February. Her face was drawn, shadows under her eyes. But she was walking upright, shoulders back, and when she saw me, she met my gaze without flinching. I stood, wanted to pull her into my arms, hold her like I used to when she was small, but she was fragile still, and we were in public, and I didn't know if she'd welcome it. "You don't have to do this," I said when she reached me. "We can find another way." Her voice was quiet but steady. "There is no other way, and I'm tired, Dad. I'm so tired." Inside the courtroom, we sat at one table, Leo and Tom Brewster at the other. Leo wouldn't look at Celeste, or couldn't. His jaw was tight, his hands flat on the table like he was holding himself down. Judge Karen Henderson presided, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and no-nonsense eyes. She reviewed the bankruptcy filing, then looked at Bernice. "Counselor, you're challenging the inclusion of the Lakewood property in the bankruptcy estate?" "Yes, Your Honor. We contend the respondent obtained ownership through coercion and fraud." "Proceed." Celeste took the witness stand. Her hands were folded in her lap, fingers laced tight. She didn't look at Leo, just at the judge, then at Bernice. "Mrs. Spencer," Judge Henderson said, "can you tell the court how your husband came to be listed as co-owner of the property?" Celeste's voice was barely above a whisper, but clear. 3 weeks after we married, Leo said we needed to update the paperwork. He said married couples share everything. I didn't know I could say no. "Did he pressure you?" "He said if I didn't trust him enough to share the house, maybe I didn't trust him enough to be married. He was angry when he said it. I was afraid." Bernice stood. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit medical records spanning the past 2 years, 6 documented emergency room visits, multiple instances of injuries Mrs. Spencer attributed to falls or accidents." She spread the records across the judge's bench. I'd seen them before. Bernice had shown me copies. But sitting there, watching the judge review them, each page felt like another weight lifting from my chest. Evidence, proof, the truth finally visible. Tom Brewster tried. "Mrs. Spencer, isn't it true you willingly signed the deed modification?" Celeste looked at him for the first time. "I signed it. I don't know if willingly is the right word." Judge Henderson was still reviewing the medical records, her expression growing harder with each page. "These injuries are consistent with domestic violence. Does the respondent wish to address this?" "Your Honor, my client maintains these were accidents." Leo exploded. He stood so fast his chair scraped backward. "She's lying. She's making this up with her father. They planned this." The judge's voice cut like a blade. "Mr. Spencer, sit down. One more outburst and you'll be removed from this courtroom." But Leo was past hearing. He pointed at Celeste, his face red. "You told me you loved me. You said—" The bailiff moved forward. Tom grabbed Leo's arm, pulling him down. Leo shook him off, but sat, breathing hard, his eyes wild. Judge Henderson waited until the room was quiet. Then she spoke, her voice measured and final. "I've heard enough. The house at the Lakewood address was gifted to Celeste Hudson prior to this marriage. The addition of Mr. Spencer as co-owner appears to have been coerced. The property is hereby excluded from bankruptcy protection and removed from Mr. Spencer's asset schedule." She wasn't finished. "Furthermore, I'm issuing a temporary order. Mr. Spencer is to vacate the property within 48 hours pending final determination of ownership. Mrs. Spencer, I'm also granting a temporary restraining order. Mr. Spencer is not to contact you or come within 500 feet of you. We'll reconvene in 30 days for final ruling." We left the courthouse together, Celeste and me. She walked beside me silently until we reached my car. When I opened the passenger door for her, she finally spoke. "I should have done it 2 years ago. I couldn't see a way out until you came back." I drove us to my apartment. It wasn't much to offer. 1 bedroom, basic furniture, nothing like the house she'd grown up planning to make her own. But it was safe. And right now, safe was everything. That evening, Celeste stood at the window, looking out at the Denver skyline. The city lights were just beginning to glow in the dusk. "What happens now?" she asked. I pulled out my phone. An email from Bernice received 10 minutes ago. Subject line, "Final hearing scheduled, August 15th. "Now we finish it," I said. She turned to face me. For the first time since I'd found her on her knees scrubbing that floor, she almost smiled. "Okay," she said, "let's finish it." The courtroom was quieter for the final hearing. Fewer people in the gallery, less tension in the air. Or maybe I was just calmer now, knowing how this would end. Celeste sat beside me, her hands folded in her lap. She'd gained a little weight back over the past month. Not much, but enough that her face didn't look so hollow. She was wearing a simple navy dress and her hair was pulled back. Professional, composed. Nothing like the woman I'd found on her knees scrubbing that hallway floor. Judge Henderson entered. We all stood, then sat. She opened a folder and adjusted her reading glasses. "I've prepared a written decision," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "After reviewing all testimony and evidence, this court finds that Mr. Leo Spencer was added to the property deed through coercion and manipulation of Mrs. Celeste Spencer. The original gift deed from Mr. Porter Hudson to his daughter remains valid. Mr. Spencer's ownership claim is hereby nullified." Celeste's hand found mine under the table. Her grip was tight. "The property located at the Lakewood address is restored to the sole ownership of Celeste Hudson Spencer. Furthermore, Mr. Spencer violated the temporary restraining order by attempting contact through a third party. This court finds his behavior demonstrates a pattern of control and disregard for legal boundaries." Across the aisle, Leo sat slumped in his chair. His court-appointed attorney, Tom Brewster, had dropped him when the money ran out. Looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Your Honor," the attorney said, standing, "my client wishes to appeal this decision." Judge Henderson didn't even look up. "That's his right. However, I'm making this ruling final and enforceable immediately. The appeal will not stay execution of this order. This case is closed." Outside the courthouse, Bernice pulled off her sunglasses. "He can't afford to appeal. Court-appointed attorneys don't handle appeals. He'd need to hire someone, and he's broke." "Good," I said, "but I want more. File a civil suit, emotional distress, medical costs, everything." She looked at me for a long moment. "That could take another 6 months to a year." "I don't care. He needs to pay for what he did. Not just lose the house. Actually pay." The Jefferson County Administration Building was less impressive than the courthouse. Beige concrete, fluorescent lighting, clerks behind bulletproof glass. I slid the cashier's check across the counter. $8,500. The clerk processed the payment, her fingers clicking across her keyboard. "That's $8,500. Let me print your receipt. The lien will be released within 5 business days." "Make sure it's recorded properly," I said. "I want no complications." "Yes, sir. This closes the matter. Property taxes are current." I folded the receipt into my wallet. One more piece cleared away. At Bernice's office later that week, Celeste signed the new deed. Just her name on the line, no one else's. "It feels strange," she said, pen hovering. "Signing my own name, just mine." Bernice smiled, not her usual sharp professional smile, but something gentler. "This is how it was supposed to be 10 years ago. Now it's right." Celeste drove herself to therapy twice a week. I'd offered to take her, but she'd declined. "I need to do some things on my own," she'd said. So I respected that, though I made sure she had my number, that she knew I was available. After one session, she came to my apartment. I made coffee and we sat at my small kitchen table. "How was it?" I asked. She looked tired. "Hard." She asked me to talk about everything, but I think I need to. "You don't have to tell me anything. Just know I'm here." "I know, Dad." Her voice was soft. "Thank you." The civil suit moved through the courts more slowly than the property case. Bernice kept me updated, filings, responses, motions. Leo's court-appointed attorney tried to fight it, but had no real ammunition. The medical records spoke for themselves. In October, the judgment came through. $25,000, $500 a month for 5 years. "Will he pay?" I asked Bernice on the phone. "He'll have to. The court will make sure of it. He's working construction day labor now. They'll take it right from his checks." Spencer Construction officially dissolved. I saw the paperwork when Bernice forwarded it to me. Leo had filed the dissolution himself, checked boxes on state forms, ended what had once been his identity. Henry told someone who told Rita, who told me that Leo was living in his spare room, sleeping on a futon, doing demolition work for $12 an hour. The information felt distant, unimportant, like hearing about someone you'd gone to high school with but barely remembered. In late August, Bernice handed Celeste the keys to the house. New keys, we'd had the locks changed as soon as the judge signed the order. Celeste held them in her palm, staring at them like they might disappear. "When do you want to go back?" I asked. She took a breath. "Tomorrow, but I don't want to go alone." "I'll be with you," I said. She looked up at me. "Will you help me make it different? Paint the walls, change things? I don't want it to look like it did when he was there," I finished. She nodded. "We'll make it yours again," I promised. "Completely yours." The house smelled stale when we opened the door. 5 weeks of being empty, windows closed, air conditioning off. Celeste stood in the entryway, not moving, just looking. "It's okay," I said quietly. "It's just a house now. He's not here." She nodded and stepped inside. We started with paint. Celeste chose the colors: warm cream for the living room, soft blue for the bedroom, pale yellow for the kitchen. We taped off trim, spread drop cloths, opened windows to let air move through. "The cream or the light blue?" she asked, holding samples against the living room wall. "It's your house, your choice." She studied them both. "The blue then. He always said blue was too soft." "Then it's perfect." We painted for 3 days, rolled over the dark gray Leo had chosen, covered it with light and warmth. Celeste worked steadily, methodically, and I could see her shoulders relax as each wall transformed. "I have a job interview tomorrow," she said while we were painting the kitchen. Casual, like she was mentioning the weather. "Accounting firm downtown. Bernice's friend recommended me." "That's great. You majored in accounting, didn't you?" 10 years ago." She moved her roller up and down in even strokes. "Leo said I didn't need to work, that he'd take care of everything." A pause. "I should have known then." "You know now. That's what matters." The furniture went next. I hauled the old couch out to the curb, Leo's choice, stained and sagging. When I came back inside, Celeste was sitting on the floor where it used to be, looking at the empty space. "You all right?" I asked. "Yeah." She stood up, brushing off her jeans. "Just noticing how much bigger the room looks without it." We bought new furniture together. Nothing expensive, just clean and simple. A cream-colored couch, a small dining table, a bed frame for Celeste's room that she picked out herself, running her hand along the wood before nodding. "This one." The interview was on a Thursday. I drove her to the office building downtown, waited in the lobby with my phone while she went up to the 14th floor. 40 minutes later, she came back out with a cautious smile. "They offered me the position." "That's wonderful. I start in 2 weeks. I'll need to refresh some things, learn their software, but..." She looked at me. "Dad, I'm going to have a job." "You're going to have a life," I said. I made my own decisions during those weeks, called my former employer in Calgary, told them I wouldn't be returning. I appreciate the opportunity, but I need to stay in Colorado, family reasons. Found a small apartment 3 miles from Celeste's house. 1 bedroom, basic kitchen. But the rent was reasonable, and the landlord didn't ask many questions. I signed the lease on a Tuesday afternoon, handed over first month's rent, took the keys. When I told Celeste, she looked worried. "Dad, you don't have to give up your job for me." "I'm not giving it up. I'm choosing something more important, and I can consult from here. I've already had 2 calls from shops in Denver." "You're sure?" "I'm sure. I left once. I won't do it again." Bernice called in mid-August with news I passed along to Celeste almost as an afterthought. Leo left the state. His last payment came from an Arizona address. Celeste was arranging books on her newly painted shelves. She didn't even turn around. Okay. That was all. Just okay. He'd become irrelevant. On a late August evening, we sat on the front porch in new chairs we'd bought together, simple wooden ones, painted white. I'd made coffee, brought out 2 mugs. The neighborhood was quiet, a few kids riding bikes down the street, someone mowing their lawn 3 houses down. Ordinary sounds. "Thank you," Celeste said, "for not giving up on me. I promised to protect you the day you were born, even if it meant fighting someone you loved." "I don't think I loved him." She spoke quietly, looking at her coffee. "Not really. I think I was just afraid. And I didn't know how to leave. You left. That's what counts. Because you came back. I should have come back sooner." She shook her head. "You came back when I needed you. That's enough." We sat in silence for a while, watching the light fade. The sky turned orange, then pink, then deep purple. "What will you do now?" I asked. Work, live, figure out who I am when I'm not afraid. She turned to look at me. Maybe that's enough for now. That's more than enough. The streetlights came on, one by one down the block. Automatic, reliable, like they did every evening. It's going to be okay, isn't it? Celeste said, not quite a question. Yes, I told her. It already is. The porch light came on above us, motion sensor I'd installed that afternoon. Celeste looked up at it. I like that, she said. That it turns on by itself. So I never have to come home to a dark house. Simple things, safety in ordinary moments. That's what I'd fought for. That's what we'd won. Across the state line, Leo Spencer was starting over in some small Arizona town, sending $500 a month to pay for the life he'd destroyed. I didn't think about him. Neither did Celeste. He'd taken 2 years from her, and we'd taken everything from him. The math wasn't equal, but it was just. And sometimes, that's the best you can hope for. We finished our coffee as the stars came out. February came around again, bringing with it the anniversary of the day I'd driven down Maple Drive and found my daughter on her knees. A year since everything had started. 6 months since it had ended. I pulled up to Celeste's house on a Saturday morning, the same house, but completely different. The lawn was green and trimmed, new rose bushes lined the foundation. Celeste had planted them in October, choosing varieties that bloomed in different seasons. The blue shutters had been repainted, bright and clean against the white siding. The crack in the front window was long gone, replaced with new glass that caught the morning sun. Celeste opened the door before I knocked. She was wearing jeans and a Colorado State sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked healthy. Not just physically, though she'd gained back the weight she'd lost and her face had color again, but something deeper. She looked like herself. Right on time, she said, stepping aside to let me in. The interior transformation was even more striking. Every room had been touched, changed, made new. The walls we'd painted together now held framed photos, landscapes, abstract art, a black and white picture of the Rocky Mountains. The furniture we'd chosen sat arranged in configurations Celeste had changed and rearranged until they felt right. Books filled the shelves. Plants sat in the windows, thriving. In the kitchen, she'd hung a calendar on the wall. I could see her neat handwriting marking appointments, work meetings, therapy sessions on Tuesdays and Thursdays, lunch with a friend named Monica next week, a reminder to call her father on Sunday. Coffee? She asked. Always. While she poured, I noticed the small things, the way she moved through her kitchen with confidence, knowing where everything was, the habit she'd developed of humming while she worked, the absence of the constant checking, looking over her shoulder, listening for footsteps, that hypervigilance that had defined her for so long. We sat at her kitchen table, the one we'd picked out together. How's work? I asked. Good, really good, actually. She wrapped her hands around her mug. They're giving me a bigger client to manage, manufacturing company, complex books. Richard said he trusts me with it. Richard was her boss. She'd mentioned him before. A deliberate, methodical man who appreciated thorough work and clear communication. The kind of boss who gave feedback and space to grow. That's excellent. I'm nervous, she admitted, but the good kind of nervous, the kind that means I care about doing it well. You will, she smiled. Dr. Chen says I'm making real progress. We're working on boundaries now, learning to recognize when people are being controlling versus just having preferences. It's harder than it sounds. Dr. Chen was her therapist, the woman she'd been seeing twice a week for 6 months. Celeste had mentioned her often, always with a kind of tired respect, like someone describing a tough but fair teacher. Are you sleeping better? I asked. Most nights. I still have bad dreams sometimes, but not as often. She took a sip of coffee. Last month I dreamed about the house being on fire. I woke up panicking, checking all the rooms. But then I realized it wasn't real. I was safe, and I went back to sleep. That's progress. Dr. Chen said the same thing. That recognizing the difference between past trauma and present reality is a big step. We talked about other things. My consulting work. I'd picked up 3 regular clients, shops that needed help with efficiency and management. Celeste's friend Monica, whom she'd met through a book club she'd joined. The garden Celeste was planning for spring, the vegetables she wanted to try growing. I got something in the mail yesterday, she said after a pause. From Arizona. I set down my mug. The payment? Yeah, $500 right on time. He's never missed one. She looked at me. Does that bother you, that he's actually paying? I considered the question. No, it means the system is working. He can't just forget what he did and move on. Every month he has to remember. I don't think about him much anymore, Celeste said. Sometimes I wonder if that makes me cold, like I should hate him more, or think about him constantly or something. It makes you healthy. He doesn't deserve space in your head. She nodded slowly. Dr. Chen says the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And I think I've gotten there. He's just someone who used to be in my life, someone who hurt me. But he's not in my life now. That's exactly right. Later, we drove to the hardware store. Celeste wanted to look at paint colors for the bathroom, the last room in the house she hadn't redone. We wandered the aisles, looking at samples, discussing the merits of seafoam, green versus pale aqua. What do you think? She asked, holding up 2 chips. Your house, your choice. She laughed. You always say that. Because it's always true. In the checkout line, I saw her notice a man arguing with his wife. Sharp words, a dismissive gesture. Celeste tensed slightly, her shoulders drawing up. But then she took a breath, deliberately relaxed, and looked away, choosing not to engage with someone else's toxicity, protecting her peace. Small victories. That's what recovery looked like. We loaded the paint into her car. She'd bought a used sedan in November, independence on 4 wheels. I followed her back to her house, helped her carry the supplies inside. You want to stay for lunch? She asked. I'm making soup. I'd like that. While she cooked, I assembled the new bathroom cabinet she'd ordered. Simple work, following instructions, using my hands. It was meditative, satisfying in its straightforwardness. No complexity, no hidden motives. Just screws and wood and the right tools for the job. Over lunch, Celeste told me about a date she'd gone on last week. A man named David she'd met through Monica. Coffee at a downtown cafe. Conversation about books and hiking trails and bad movies they had both loved as kids. Are you seeing him again? I asked. Maybe. He asked, and I said I'd think about it. She stirred her soup. Dr. Chen says I need to be careful not to rush into anything, to take time to really know someone before I trust them. But she also said I can't be afraid forever. There's a balance. Yeah, I'm trying to find it. She looked up at me. It's strange, you know, learning how to date in my 30s. I feel like I'm doing everything backwards. You're doing everything at the right time, your time. After lunch, I helped her start painting the bathroom. We worked in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from knowing each other well enough that words aren't always necessary. The seafoam green covered the old beige, transforming the small space into something brighter. When I left that evening, Celeste walked me to the door. The porch light was already on, motion sensor working perfectly. Same time next week? She asked. Same time. She hugged me, quick and tight. Thank you, Dad, for everything. You don't have to thank me. I know, but I want to. I drove back to my apartment as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The city stretched out around me, full of people living their lives, fighting their battles, finding their way through. Somewhere in Arizona, Leo Spencer was probably finishing his shift at whatever construction site employed him now. He'd go home to whatever small apartment he could afford, write a check for $500, mail it to the address his court paperwork specified. 4.5 more years of that. Monthly reminders of what he'd lost. I didn't hate him anymore. Didn't think about him except in moments like this. And even then, only peripherally. He was a problem I'd solved, a threat I'd neutralized. The emotional energy I'd spent on destroying him had been rechanneled into building something better. Celeste had her house back, her life back, herself back. That was the point of everything. Not revenge for its own sake, but justice that created space for healing. Not tearing down for the satisfaction of destruction, but clearing ground so something new could grow. At my apartment, I made dinner, checked my email, read for a while before bed. An ordinary evening. Unremarkable in every way, except that it represented something I'd fought for. The right for my daughter to have ordinary evenings too. Safe, simple, boring, in the best possible way. My phone buzzed, a text from Celeste. Bathroom's done, looks amazing. Thank you for your help today. I typed back, anytime, proud of you. Her response came quickly. Proud of us both. I set the phone down and looked out my window at the Denver skyline, lights flickering on as darkness fell. Thousands of windows, thousands of lives, thousands of stories playing out behind glass and walls. This had been mine, a father who came back, a daughter who found her strength, a man who learned that sometimes love means fighting, and fighting means being strategic, patient, ruthless when necessary. I'd spent 8 years in Calgary building someone else's business, while my daughter suffered in a house I'd bought her as a gift. That failure would always be with me, a scar I'd carry, but I'd come back. I'd fought. I'd won. Not perfectly, not without cost, but enough. Celeste was healing. She was working. She was learning to trust herself again, to make choices, to build the life she wanted rather than the one someone else demanded. That was justice. That was enough. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.